Hello friends, so if you want to watch super hit movie Locked in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel's MTV Friends. In today's video, the movie we're going to talk about is called Locked. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you'll watch this movie. This video is produced by MTV. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you apart from this. We will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story of this film. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production, filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end. So I'll start the video. Locked is a 2025 American action thriller film directed by David Yarovesky and starring Bill Skarsgård and Anthony Hopkins. It is an English-language remake of the Argentinian 2019 action film 4x4. Plot: a young, flippant carjacker is trapped in a heavily modified car by a mysterious sociopath who intends to teach him the consequences of his lifestyle. Cast: Bill Skarsgård as Eddie Barish, Anthony Hopkins as William, Ashley Cartwright as Sarah, Michael Eklund as Carl, Naveed Charkey as Butter. Production: the film is a remake of the Argentinian action thriller 4x4 for ZQ Entertainment and Raimi Productions, with David Yarovesky as director and Keshishian and Petr Jákl producing under their ZQ Entertainment banner, with Sam Raimi and Zainab Azizi producing for Raimi Productions. In February 2023, Anthony Hopkins and Glenn Powell were attached to the project in acting roles. Later, it was revealed that Bill Skarsgård replaced Powell. In February 2025, it was revealed that Ashley Cartwright, Michael Eklund, and Naveed Charkey had also joined the cast. Principal photography took place in Vancouver in late 2023. Release: the film was shown to accredited buyers in the Industry Selects program at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival on September 6, 2024. The film's rights were bought by The Avenue. Locked was released on March 21, 2025 by The Avenue. Critical response: on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 66% of 58 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.9/10. The website's consensus reads, matching up Bill Skarsgård and Anthony Hopkins in a battle of wits, Locked is loaded with plenty of clever jolts, even if it doesn't quite know where to park its story. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 45 out of 100, based on 10 critics indicating mixed or average reviews. David Yarovesky's Locked is a solid showcase for the underrated range of Bill Skarsgård, who can slide from a moody creature like his character in Nosferatu to a panicked one-man show like this one with ease. And that's about it. As good as Skarsgård is here, he gets stuck in a movie that has no idea what to do with him or its concept, repeating the same shallow themes and scenes of torture before lurching to an unsatisfying conclusion. Locked starts promisingly, and then almost refuses to really go anywhere, trapped by its own concept and unwillingness to do anything thematically richer than wealthy people be crazy. Eddie Skarsgård is the kind of low-level criminal who just needs one more good job to get himself free of his past to live his future with his daughter. There's a far more daring version of Locked that presents an Eddie who's a true bad guy and then forces us to ask if what happens to him is a form of karma. But this isn't that movie. This one isn't even risky enough to let Eddie's inciting incident be an actual break-in. When Eddie spots a luxury SUV in a remote parking lot, he decides to see if the door is unlocked, and it is. After looking around the car, he tries to leave, only to find he is now a prisoner of this impressive ride. The windows are tinted so he can't signal for help, and something is stopping his phone from calling out. And then things get weird. As Eddie is trying to escape, he hears the voice of a man named William, Anthony Hopkins, mostly literally phoning this one in. His captor remains depressingly vague about what he wants from Eddie. He's more of a whiny man-child than a Jigsaw-esque mastermind, as he tortures our protagonist for the majority of the movie. I'm not sure I've ever seen so many scenes of someone being tased. Every time that Eddie talks back or even swears, he gets electrocuted by the car, and William is also able to play with the temperature in the automobile, first freezing and then sweating out poor Eddie. By the time that Eddie was considering drinking his own pee to stave off dehydration, I was about done with the torture. Why is William doing this to a hapless stranger who happened to break into his car? He reveals that he's in the end stages of a cancer diagnosis and that his daughter was recently killed by street criminals. He's decided to become vigilante in his final days, as if that can provide some closure. The most interesting thing about William is how much Hopkins and writer Michael Arlen Ross are willing to drain him of anything approaching empathy. Some films would have softened William as a way to understand how trauma can lead people to become someone that their old self wouldn't recognize, but William is just a monster. He has no sympathy for Eddie and seems to enjoy torturing him. As fun as Locked may be for William, the same isn't true for viewers. It's a film that seems notably slight on ideas. Every time it flirts with commentary on haves torturing have-nots or how empathy is in short supply when it comes to the treatment of criminals in our society, it pulls away to another torture sequence. Even that stuff feels inert in that Eddie doesn't have enough control in this situation to make it a true battle of wills. We know Eddie will escape because this is never a bleak enough movie to suggest otherwise, and that drains Locked of actual tension. This kind of film lives and dies on the journey instead of the destination, and this one just made me feel trapped. High concept used to be industry terminology for movies whose premise was precise, succinct, and intriguing. But these days it's used interchangeably as shorthand to describe ones that just sound lazy instead of creative. Take Locked for a timely example. It's about a thief who finds himself locked inside the car he's trying to burglarize. Remaking the 2019 Argentinian film 4x4, director David Yarovesky, Brightburn, translates that film's ticking clock tension into a simmering pressure cooker character study that's been superficially overlaid with timely political rhetoric. But seldom has the phrase "mileage may vary" applied more than it does to this film, even with two relative heavyweights, Bill Skarsgård and Anthony Hopkins, in its two main roles, as Yarovesky fulfills his marching orders dutifully, but with uneven success. Skarsgård plays Eddie Barish, a ne'er-do-well driver who's about $500 shy of the cost of the part that will get his delivery van out of local mechanic Carl's, Michael Eklund garage. Until then, unable to pick up his daughter Sarah, Ashley Cartwright, from school, a show of responsibility he hopes will facilitate a reconciliation with his wife Amy, Gabrielle Walsh. Eddie desperately scrounges for cash, eventually deciding to loot the nearest car that's unlocked. He eventually finds a black SUV and hops inside to pilfer whatever he can find in its glove compartment. Unfortunately, when he tries to exit the vehicle, he discovers that it's locked and quite impossible to escape. He scratches his arm while trying to pry off a door panel, then accidentally shoots himself in the leg when a bullet from his gun ricochets off the glass. While he's sitting there, bleeding and exasperated, a call comes through the vehicle from William, Hopkins, its owner. William cheerfully explains that Eddie's is the 7th break-in his car has experienced, and he fully intends to set an example with the young perpetrator to achieve a version of justice he believes that the legal system has abdicated. Eddie eventually passes out from blood loss, but when he reawakens in the car with his wounds cleaned and bandaged, he realizes that William's designs run deeper and more sinister than to even the scales for a petty crime. Armed with little more than his wits, Eddie tries to plan an escape, quickly realizing that he's not just facing arrest or some twisted form of corporal punishment, but the very real possibility that he will die from William's retribution. Where 4x4 more aggressively embraced the criminal misbehavior of its protagonist, writer Michael Arlen Ross's screenplay for Locked immediately tries to create a more complex, sympathetic portrait of Eddie. For example, even though he's trying to break into cars, he feeds water to a dog through the window of one of them he can't enter. Such a character is an overfamiliar cinematic staple. a well-meaning, blue-collar guy who just made some bad life decisions with whom the audience should side because of his palpably sincere love for his daughter. Yet to rally sympathy behind someone who, by all accounts, is a repeat screw-up and at least a petty thief, Ross creates in William a character who quickly demonstrates that he embodies everything he seems to believe proletariat moviegoers stand against. Though he provides a backstory involving a crime that ended with the death of a family member to explain his thirst for vengeance, William is otherwise a wealthy one-percenter who not only custom-designed the car and its many bells and whistles, but harps on social permissiveness and entitlement to validate his point of view. It's a choice, like those in a number of films right now, that may play unevenly in a cultural climate where the haves and have-nots feel especially more divided than ever. Yet isolated and locked, it feels like superficial fuel to set these characters apart, much less to legitimize the gauntlet of torture and torment to which William subjects Eddie. As Eddie, Skarsgård doesn't carry the automatic likability to get the audience on board with his plight. Perhaps it's because he's played creeps and weirdos so effectively in the past, but he fails to make us believe the character's insistence that he truly cares about his family and is just a day away from turning everything around for the better. Meanwhile, as undeniably gifted as Hopkins is, his performance as William marks the umpteenth time he's been called upon to elevate material that's really far beneath his skill level. He only partially succeeds. Despite that sorrowful backstory, William's perspective is never terribly relatable, and he can't quite find the logic in the character's mean-spirited persistence. After showing promise with Brightburn, Yarovesky directs this with all of the passion that he has, well, to keep getting work, but he navigates the cabin of William's car with a consistent and clear sense of geography. Thankfully, he abandons florid showmanship after initially exploring the car's interior with a dizzying circular tracking shot. But again, Ross's script doesn't quite ground William's elaborate revenge plot, making the movie feel more like a stunt, think Devil or Buried, than an even vaguely realistic scenario. Rather than high concept, it ultimately feels like a concept, and one that never marries its setup to a motivation or meaning that gives it a whole lot of dramatic intensity, much less depth. Locked is not without limited charms, but it ultimately fails to bridge the gap between putting audiences in the car with Eddie and actually wanting to make them go for the ride. When we first meet Eddie, Bill Skarsgård, a recently divorced father, he's begging a mechanic to give him a few more days to pay the bill. No catch, and no car. Desperate Eddie breaks into a snazzy sport utility vehicle, hoping to pawn whatever valuables he finds. It's here, inside the vehicle, that most of Locked takes place. Directed by David Yarovesky, this gimmicky thriller is an adaptation of the Argentine film 4x4, set in a big American city where the class divide is stark and petty crimes are aplenty. The SUV is quickly revealed as a trap staged by William Anthony Hopkins, a deranged vigilante in the vein of the Saw franchise's Jigsaw, who lashes out against those who he thinks have broken the social contract. Hopkins's Hannibal Lecter credentials and William's penchant for classical music also give him a menacingly refined air that plays off Eddie's rough exterior, underscoring the film's clunky rich versus poor through-line. Hopkins spends most of the movie off-screen, speaking to his victim through the car's speakers and zapping him remotely through devices in the seats. Struggling to find a way out, Eddie at one point shoots a gun at the bulletproof windows, causing a bullet to strike him in the leg. William gleefully observes the younger man deteriorate from the point of view of a surveillance camera, progressively ramping up the sadism. Still, the violent fun and games aren't quite inventive enough to get past the single setting and its cramped leather seats. The performers hold their ground even if the script simply goes through the motions. The car as prison may at first come off like a new jam, and yet you've definitely seen it all before. A thief breaking into a luxury SUV realizes that he has slipped into a sophisticated game of psychological horror. Bill Skarsgård's down-on-his-luck common man, Eddie, is in a pickle. He's an unreliable father to the point that his significant other is fed up with it. However, Eddie seems to care about his daughter genuinely. He mostly lets her down because he is wrapped up trying to accomplish something else, hoping he appears less of a deadbeat when he comes into contact with her. One such example is his consistent failure to pick her up after school, which has become a problem due to his car needing repairs that he can't afford yet. This final straw pushes him into desperation mode, lowering himself to attempted delivery from a parked open SUV which will lock itself upon entry, hence the title Locked. From director David Yarovesky and a screenplay by Michael Arlen Ross, based on the 2019 film 4x4 from Mariano Cohn and Gaston Duprat, that premise becomes a vessel for a cross between what feels like an extended saw trap and class warfare exchanges, which I suppose is also a theme of that franchise. Not only is there nothing worth stealing and pawning from the SUV, but there is now no way out. Eddie also finds out the hard way that the windows are made of bulletproof glass, with a bullet reflecting into his leg. Shortly after, the vehicle's computer system turns on, gracing us with the voice of an angry, deranged Anthony Hopkins playing justice-seeking William. Sounding like a boomer relative that has watched too much Fox News, William goes off about differences between the generations and how once upon a time you could leave a car or even a home unlocked without having to worry someone would break in, whether it be for purely malicious reasons or desperation to lift some cash and put it toward a more noble, honorable life taking care of loved ones. William also has no sympathy for the latter, delivering some right-wing talking points regarding how not complaining and working hard paid off for him. Eddie is also forced into listening to this ranting and raving, as William can remotely tase his prisoner and does so often, especially if he starts swearing. He can also alter the temperature of the SUV should more dramatic measures be taken. Since this terrorizing takes place over several days, William also uses the security cameras in the car to visit when Eddie is asleep, slipping in some water or bandaging his leg wound without waking him. Presumably, the filmmakers know how ridiculous that is since it is kept off screen. This is also a limiting premise, meaning Locked occasionally feels like its talking points and torture methods are going in circles. When these two aren't conversing, Eddie is either searching yet again for an escape path or swearing up a storm. For the first 40 minutes, he shows almost no interest in hearing William out, which is understandable given the circumstances, yet also frustrating since it's clear he has no other option. It's as if the movie is dragging itself out before it can really get underway. Once the car is forced into motion, William's psychopathic behavior ramps up, resulting in a couple of thrilling moments here. Still, much of this feels like a waiting game for that character to let his guard down somehow, likely through Anthony Hopkins appearing on screen and finding a convoluted reason to get into the car. And even though the film paints him as the villain, the film's politics questionably are comfortable backing him up through Eddie having purchased a winning scratch-off lottery ticket before entering the SUV, implying that he deserves this death-trap terror for making a mistake during a vulnerable, desperate moment. This isn't a justification for stealing, but an observation that the screenplay sides with some of William's dated beliefs on society that all hard work is magically rewarded. At a certain point, Locked is too absurd to take seriously, while also taking itself too seriously, never able to find the right balance. It devolves into cliches and predictable action beats, only elevated by star power. Where else are you going to see Bill Skarsgård not slathered in prosthetics and using his real voice, or Anthony Hopkins making his best Jigsaw impression? It never fully locks the viewer in. Locked, David Yarovesky's English-language remake of the 2019 Argentinian thriller 4x4, comes equipped with a simple premise. A petty criminal, while attempting to steal a luxury vehicle, becomes trapped inside when he triggers its aggressive and complex security system. Although that concept might seem a little thin for a feature film, it is. There are certainly actionable possibilities for tension embedded in the idea, especially once it's revealed that the owner of the car is a sadist who can see everything that happens inside the SUV and revels in toying with the would-be thief. Alas, the disappointingly straightforward screenplay drags things out too long, relies on banal, rambling dialogue, and offers little in the way of twists or turns. And Yarovesky's direction often fails to lean into the inherent claustrophobia of the situation while failing to generate sufficient suspense from the cat-and-mouse game engaged in by Eddie, Bill Skarsgård, and William, Anthony Hopkins. The moral of the story: crime doesn't pay. Or at least it doesn't for Eddie, who spends roughly 80 minutes of the film's 95-minute running time trapped inside William's armor-plated tank of a vehicle. Once in, there's no way out. The windows are one-way mirrors. Eddie can see out, but no one can see in. They are also bulletproof, rendering the criminal's gun useless. Cell service has been disabled, but there's a communication system that allows William to watch and talk to Eddie. Later, we learn that the elder gentleman can also remote control the car with remarkable precision. It's a fair question to ask whether Locked might have been more enjoyable if either of the characters had been even a little likable. Eddie is a total loser, a deadbeat dad whose parenting skills are on par with his ability to hold down a legitimate job. His few redeeming qualities are well concealed, and he most definitely is not the brightest bulb in the package. William, on the other hand, may have a calm, cultured voice, but his dulcet tones hide a deviant mind. He's a nasty piece of work who baits the trap, then uses it to torture and torment Eddie. I'd say there's about 45 to 50 minutes of potentially engaging material in this screenplay. That forces the filmmakers to add another 45 minutes of padding. Most of the extraneous material is comprised of repetitious sequences in which Eddie attempts to tear apart the inside of the car, or where William rambles on about nothing and everything. The movie is in desperate need of some pithy interplay. Eddie's contributions to their conversations don't go much beyond dropping the F-bomb. On a certain level, I was reminded of Joel Schumacher's 2002 film Phone Booth, which trapped Colin Farrell in a phone booth for about 75 minutes. Some of the same elements are in play: a lunatic with a grudge who is primarily just a disembodied voice, a constricted space, and an escalation of the cat-and-mouse games. Phone Booth succeeded, however, because Schumacher understood the underlying tenets of a Hitchcockian refrigerator movie and applied them with aptitude. Yarovesky, on the other hand, founders. Even during the climax, the movie never gets exciting or edgy. We keep waiting for some kind of surprise twist that will make everything worthwhile, but there's nothing. Even when William finally appears in the flesh, it's a letdown, and the movie doesn't get us to care enough to look past the obvious, ever-widening plot holes. The performances are solid, with Bill Skarsgård getting to act without being buried under makeup, and Hopkins relying mostly on his recognizable voice. One wishes that when he finally shows up, he would lean a little more into his Hannibal Lecter personality. The antagonism between the two often feels manufactured, and it's hard to perceive Eddie as a victim even when the movie uses his young daughter in a shameless attempt at manipulation, something I found profoundly distasteful. Making a movie with this many constraints is a daunting task that should only be attempted by someone with a crystal-clear vision and a skill for wringing tension out of an inherently hard-to-swallow situation. Yarovesky, whose resume includes the misfire Brightburn, has apparently bitten off more than he can chew. The seeds of a nice little white-knuckle thriller are evident, but they never germinate properly. The end result is profoundly disappointing and can't be saved by the few individual moments that do work. Swedish actor Bill Skarsgård will visit Prague next week to personally present his latest film, the survival thriller Locked, at its European premiere. Skarsgård, perhaps best known for portraying the clown Pennywise in two adaptations of Stephen King's It, will introduce the film alongside Czech producer Petr Jákl at Cinema City Slovanský Dům on March 26th. The Prague debut follows the movie's New York premiere, where both Skarsgård and Jákl are also scheduled to appear. Locked is set for wide release in Czech cinemas from Thursday, April 3rd. Skarsgård has spent a lot of time in Prague in recent years, shooting The Crow in the Czech capital in 2022 and Robert Eggers' horror film Nosferatu in 2023. Speaking ahead of the premiere in New York, he expressed enthusiasm about returning to the Czech capital. "I love Prague, and I'm really looking forward to the premiere," Skarsgård said. The last time I was here was while filming Nosferatu, where I met Petr, and we first started talking about working together on Locked. Bill moves from one project to another, but we've been planning to meet for some time. This was the perfect opportunity, said Jákl, who described Skarsgård's personal appearance in Prague as a sign of his commitment to the film. Having him here shows he really believes in the movie. Directed by David Yarovesky and produced by Jákl alongside Keshishian and Sam Raimi, Locked stars Skarsgård as Eddie, a street thief who seizes the opportunity to steal from a seemingly abandoned luxury SUV parked in an empty lot. What begins as a petty crime quickly spirals into a life-or-death struggle when the vehicle's doors lock automatically, trapping him inside. Eddie soon realizes he is not dealing with an ordinary car owner. His captor, William, played by Oscar winner Anthony Hopkins, has set the trap as part of a twisted game. Frustrated by repeated thefts and a lack of justice, William takes matters into his own hands, luring Eddie into a psychological battle where the rules are his alone.
For Jákl, securing Prague as the location for Locked's European premiere is a personal victory. "It's amazing that we managed to have the European premiere here," he said. "I try to do this with other films I produce, but arranging schedules with actors is incredibly complicated."
Locked adds to Skarsgård's growing list of high-profile roles. In addition to his acclaimed performance as Pennywise, the actor has recently starred in Nosferatu, Boy Kills World, and John Wick Chapter 4. His intense screen presence and versatility have made him a sought-after talent in Hollywood.
Jákl, known in the Czech Republic both for his stunt work and filmmaking, has similarly built a diverse international career. After starting as a stuntman and body double on films such as XXX and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Jákl transitioned into directing with titles like Kajinek and Ghoul. His most ambitious project to date, Medieval, was reportedly the most expensive Czech film ever made, with a budget of nearly CZK 500 million, 20 million.
As a producer over the past decade, Jákl has collaborated with major Hollywood names including Russell Crowe, Mel Gibson, and Morgan Freeman. With Locked, he continues his efforts to bridge international productions with the Czech film industry. Who hasn't fantasized about their car taking vengeance on would-be thieves? In director David Yarovesky's Locked, this vindictive daydream becomes a nightmare reality when Eddie Barish, Bill Skarsgård, Nosferatu, breaks into a luxury SUV that transforms into his high-tech, leather-lined prison. This English-language remake of the 2019 Argentinian nail-biter 4-4 flips the script on 2022's Property, where a woman voluntarily locked herself in an armored vehicle to survive. Here, our protagonist is the one being punished, trapped by an unseen tormentor with a twisted sense of justice. Desperate for cash and arguing with his ex over money he doesn't have, petty thief Eddie is expecting a quick score when he eyes an unoccupied black vehicle in an innocuous parking lot. What he doesn't expect in the routine smash and grab is for the SUV to become his prison, trapping him inside a fortress of punishment by William, Anthony Hopkins the father, a self-styled vigilante watching from the shadows, determined to administer his brand of justice. The car isn't just locked, it's weaponized, complete with electrified seats, a climate control system that can turn the interior into an oven or icebox, and an entertainment system that torturously keeps yodeling music on a loop. What follows is a battle of wits, or at least it should be. Instead, Locked meanders, stretching its thin premise across 95 minutes that feel better suited to an hour-long Black Mirror episode. It shouldn't come as a surprise given his track record for fully immersing himself in his characters, but Skarsgård is fully committed, tackling the physical demands of the role by spending the bulk of the movie confined and cramped, alternating between desperation, rage, and exhaustion. The opening act does a better-than-decent job setting up his character. We can see he's not a hardened criminal, he's just a man in over his head. His daughter is growing up without him, his ex pleads with him to stop missing important moments in their child's life, and his options are running thin. The jittery schemer is easy to root for in these early scenes, but as the film goes on, the screenplay fails him, eroding the sympathy we've built by cycling Eddie through the same beats and rehashing his unfortunate predicament without adding any depth. Cinematographer Michael Dalla Torre makes the most of the confined setting, working with Yarovesky to ensure the mostly single-location story remains visually engaging. The SUV, a creation of Chris Bergthorson, Godzilla Tomorrowland, is a marvel of unbranded, ominous luxury. It's the kind of vehicle a Bond villain would own, which is both Locke's greatest strength and its biggest weakness. As the story progresses, the car's over-the-top features push the narrative into near parody, undercutting the grounded tension the movie strives for. There's only so much that can happen when your protagonist is physically stuck in one place, and Locke struggles to maintain its momentum. Even though William takes Eddie on a few wild rides to demonstrate his vigilantism, it reveals the film's questionable taste level. What begins as a psychological thriller occasionally veers into grotesque violence, and an alarming chase scene involving a child feels unnecessarily exploitative. Yarovesky's previous film, 2019's pseudo-evil Superman tale Brightburn, also struggled with balancing its narrative thrust with ugly moments of brutality. The film tosses around big ideas: vigilante justice, the consequences of crime, the fine line between right and wrong, but never fully commits to them. William sees himself as an agent of moral reckoning, yet his punishment grows progressively more sadistic and his philosophical musings become tiresome. By the time the movie hits its more gruesome sequences, it's clear that Locke has lost sight of its message, mistaking brutality for suspense. The film's moral compass spins wildly as Hopkins' character, whose motivation extends beyond mere revenge for breaking and entering, becomes increasingly hypocritical, doling out punishment far exceeding the crime. Speaking of Hopkins, usually a master of icy menace, his participation feels perfunctory at best, reduced to a voice on the other end of the phone for most of the runtime. The Oscar winner literally dials in his performance, appearing only in the final 10 minutes of the film. By the time he finally appears on screen, it's too little, too late, and even then, the movie leans heavily on a body double, making his presence feel even more disconnected. As written, the role seems beneath an actor of his caliber, better suited for the Hopkins of 30 years ago than the legend we see today. Locke could have worked as a tight, mean little thriller, and you can see the structure in place for what might have been. There's a certain satisfaction in seeing a thief get his comeuppance, but when the punishment becomes so excessive that the audience starts questioning who the real villain is, the film loses a critical aspect of its perspective. Skarsgård does his best, but he's acting in a void, up against an antagonist who remains an off-screen voice for most of the runtime. If the script had tightened its focus and given him a more present and engaging adversary, this could have been the heart-pounding ride the filmmakers intended. You would not be crazy if you confused Stephen Knight's 2013 man-confined-in-a-car movie Locke with director David Yarovesky's new thriller Locked, which has Bill Skarsgård trapped in a nightmare car with no way out. The former had Tom Hardy as a troubled guy named Locke watching his life unravel during a feature-length road trip. This one has Skarsgård as Eddie, a deadbeat but well-meaning dad to Sarah, Ashley Cart, and petty thief whose attempt to steal a luxury SUV turns into disaster because its unseen psycho-vigilante owner named William, Anthony Hopkins, has rigged it so bad things happen. And there is no way out as he continues to pull the strings remotely in this motorized fortress as he carries on a conversation with the imprisoned Eddie. That is the premise of Locked, the latest in a series of horror concepts set in an automobile, except this is no talking car like Kit in Knight Rider or lovable free thinker like Herbie in The Love Bug. An inside joke in Michael Arlen Ross's screenplay has Eddie refer to his daughter as Love Bug. It also isn't one of those killer car flicks like The Car or Christine portraying a demon on wheels. This concept came from Mariano Cohn's 2019 Argentinian 4x4 and put through the remake machine by producer Sam Raimi, who has given it a reason to exist due to the casting of its 2 stars. Neither is a stranger to horror, as Skarsgård is coming off Nosferatu and was Pennywise in It, and Hopkins won an Oscar as Hannibal Lecter, a character so vivid the current U.S. president kept bringing him up at campaign rallies, apparently believing he was real. In Locked, Hopkins isn't even seen until more than an hour into the 95-minute movie, but is only heard in a voiceover performance he gets to phone in. But what a performance. Hopkins can do more with a line like, "You got in the wrong car, Eddie," than any actor on Earth. This psychotic whack job has lots of grievances against society, particularly those who are on the fringe and have nothing, unlike him, whose luxury automobile represents a person who has it all and the security technology to keep it that way. Indeed, Eddie got into the wrong car, where William plays his games like Jigsaw in Saw, employing a little well-choreographed torture every few minutes as he muses on the ills of the world and keeps the bad times coming, even when he hangs up and forces Eddie to listen to polka music on a loop. Arr. Eddie is in pain, and it is only going to get worse, especially when William lets the car start driving on its own, on a terror spree down dark alleys, running over those he perceives as worthless, much to Eddie's, discomfort. When William finally appears in person late in the game, the face-off between him and Eddie is worth the wait, if only just to see these two exceptional actors go at it. In fact, the opportunity to see this pairing is the main reason to recommend a trip to the theater, but maybe you'll want to take alternate transportation. Yarovesky skillfully steers the action in such a confined space, sometimes quite cleverly, and Michael Dallatore's camera work also does the job. But if you are claustrophobic, this might not be the dream date movie for you. I am not at all sure why 35 executive producer credits were necessary. They're all listed on the poster too. In addition to 7 producers, including Raimi, and 7 other co-EP and co-producer credits. This is close to a record since the Producers Guild established a PGA mark to rein in the overuse of producing credits. From director David Yarovesky and producer Sam Raimi comes Locked, a tightly wound, high-concept action thriller that brings together the hard-working Bill Skarsgård and the effortlessly great Anthony Hopkins. Locked is an English-language remake of Mariano Cone's 2019 Argentinian film 4-4. It was filmed and is set in Vancouver, Canada, which adds a vivid urbanized texture while playing a big part in the storytelling. Skarsgård plays Eddie Barish, a down-on-his-luck petty thief whose bad choices put him in a perilous predicament. Eddie is broke, unable to muster the $475 needed to get his beat-up van out of the garage. So he resorts to snatching wallets, buying scratch-offs, and breaking into cars. To make matters worse, he's in hot water with his ex-wife for routinely standing up his young daughter Sarah, Ashley Cartwright. While cutting through a near-vacant backstreet parking lot, Eddie notices a fancy black SUV appropriately branded Dolus. He checks the door and finds it unlocked. Jumping in unnoticed, he immediately begins rummaging for anything to sell, but finds nothing. When he tries to get out, he discovers the doors are locked. He attempts kicking out the glass, but to no avail. He learns all cell signal is blocked and it's soundproof, so he can't scream for help. After several more vain attempts at escaping, Eddie realizes he's trapped. As Eddie panics over his sudden predicament, the vehicle's phone rings. On the other end is an elderly man who introduces himself as William Hopkins. The two engage in a hostile back and forth in which William exercises his dominance. He watches his trapped prey through 6 embedded cameras, shocking Eddie with the electrified interior whenever he gets out of line. William even resorts to torturing Eddie with heat, cold, and in a darkly comical turn, blaring polka music. Why is William doing this? Well, it's best you find out on your own, but it's all a sick game built upon his sociopathic sense of justice. As William and Eddie continue their tete-a-tetes, we learn more about each of them, their pasts, their circumstances, and in some instances, their motivations. A few arguments feel a bit fabricated, such as one conversation that quickly evolves into on-the-nose political commentary, but most build towards the film's harrowing final act, which is set in motion once the sleek high-tech SUV hits the streets. While there's no denying the ultimate absurdity of the premise, Locked rides along on the firm commitment of Skarsgård and Hopkins. The duo does everything they can to keep the story driving forward, even as the movie struggles to fill its lean 95 minutes. And while its midsection lulls bog things down a bit, there's just enough meat on the bones of this gritty genre two-hander to hold your interest. Locked hits theaters March 21st. What do you get when you lock a young criminal in a luxury sports utility vehicle that is booby-trapped to punish its intruder thanks to some twisted, sadistic planning by its wealthy, vengeful owner? Well, if those two characters are played by Bill Skarsgård and Anthony Hopkins and the film is directed by David Yarovesky, you get a wild, claustrophobic ride with chaotic camera movement, jump scares, and danger that escalates with every scene, all within the confines of an SUV. When Yarovesky was given the script for Locked, which opened in theaters on March 21st, he was immediately attracted to the story and how the stakes for the characters continually elevate. On top of that, the tight quarters in which the action takes place was a creative and technical challenge he couldn't resist. I really hadn't made a movie like this before, Yarovesky says. It felt like a space that could really use something that felt organic and just really tense. Really tense, puts it mildly. The minute Skarsgård's Eddie shuts the vehicle's door and then can't open it, his world starts to spin, and the audience immediately feels trapped along with him. As the film progresses and the soundproof, indestructible walls of the vehicle close in tighter, the look and feel of the film intensifies and continues to build as Hopkins' William becomes increasingly psychotic, using the programmed vehicle to, basically, torture its captive. With only two main characters, one of whom is mostly heard and not seen, and one very small setting in which to tell the story, Yarovesky's task was not an easy one. As William begins to communicate with Billy through the vehicle's computer system, and his insanity becomes abundantly clear, a power struggle plays out inside the car, which is reflected in the cinematography. Making this movie was insanely hard, Yarovesky laughs. I shot it in 19 days, and our hands were tied in so many ways. It's an indie movie, so I didn't have a big studio to throw money at stuff, and that presented a whole bunch of challenges. And then again, one of the other tropes of this space of specifically contained thrillers, like movies where someone's trapped in a small space, is often that small space becomes constricting and prevents you from being able to shoot it in a cinematic way. But where there's a will, there's a way. And with the aid of DP Michael Dalator and Dan Sasaki at Panavision, magic was made. Dan built us lenses custom for this, Yarovesky explains. Anamorphic lenses can't focus anywhere near close enough to put it in a car with someone else, so he built us the widest anamorphic lens they had in their inventory and then brute-forced other lenses for us to make them so that the minimum focus distance was inches. While shooting Dunkirk for Christopher Nolan, Sasaki had an idea of a lens with an elbow joint, but never got to build it, until Locked. Production designer Grant Armstrong worked under similar constraints for the 2014 sci-fi Gravity, in which they shot in really tight pod-like spaces. In order to do that on Gravity, they built it on a platform and in pieces on rails, so it was very easy. With one arm, you could just slide a quarter of the set away and slide it right back. And so we started talking about doing that with the interior set so that we could do anything, go anywhere. We could be completely free. On the surface, Locked looks like a vigilante film. You know, actions have consequences and crime doesn't pay. But is there a political statement here about law and order? Yarovesky says it goes deeper, much deeper than that. Politics have infected every aspect of our life these days. It's almost impossible in 2025 to write a character and not know their political stance and their beliefs on a couple things, which is an unfortunate statement about where we are, he says. But this isn't a political movie. And so, as a filmmaker, I tried to the best of my ability not to weigh on that scale. I allowed two people to really argue it out and make points and one-up each other. I didn't want to put a finger on that scale because the story I'm telling you is a moral tale. Locked is based on the 2019 Argentinian film 4x4. Without having seen the original, it's not possible to say how tonally faithful Locked is to its inspiration, though both involve a thief trapped in a high-tech vehicle. However, genre fans may note certain similarities between Locked and the Saw franchise. Both involve a criminal who is ensnared by a master gamesman who uses torture to make socio-political points. The main differences are that the Saw movies are way bloodier, have more characters, and are less didactic. Eddie Barish, Bill Skarsgård, is a low-level thief and loser, trying unsuccessful scams to get enough money to retrieve his van from the mechanics. Eddie's ex-wife is understandably exasperated with him for failing to pick up their little girl Sarah, Ashley Cartwright, from school when he promises to do so. Since Eddie genuinely loves his daughter, he's ashamed of himself for this lapse, and he's none too thrilled with how life is shaking out. However, a better path doesn't occur to him. Then Eddie comes across an ultra-high-end, indeed one-of-a-kind SUV in a mostly empty city parking lot. Eddie lets himself inside and finds that the doors won't unlock, the glass won't break, and eventually that he really needs to answer the insistent in-car phone system. On the other end is the SUV's owner, William, Anthony Hopkins. William is a doctor with virtually unlimited funds, although not a projected lifespan to match. William and Eddie don't know each other, but William knows Eddie's type, someone who justifies taking what he wants and doesn't care who he hurts in the process. It's easy to see why Skarsgård took the role of Eddie, since it allows him to go through a wide gamut of emotions, as well as being on screen for practically every shot. He is certainly up to the challenges, letting us see Eddie break down and reform bit by bit. What probably no actor could do is make the surroundings more interesting, at least without better assistance from the filmmakers. Hopkins is assured and perfectly cast as the erudite sadist who has provided for almost every eventuality. Director David Yarovesky and screenwriter Michael Arlen Ross seem to be aiming at an arc that has us sympathizing with William at first, both because he's got some legitimate grievances and because Eddie is such a jerk at the start. Then our sympathies are evidently meant to shift as we see more of Eddie's humanity and empathize with some of what he's going through. But once we've gotten a good look at the SUV, it isn't intrinsically fascinating, nor is Eddie's ordeal. Because it's never very graphic and because William's stated intention is to torment rather than kill Eddie, we're never too worried for him, at least until the climax. Sony Pictures has a big anime film locked down for 2025, and it could be even bigger than Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. At least the first film in the upcoming Demon Slayer Infinity Castle trilogy is set to debut in 2025. There isn't an exact release date, but with Demon Slayer still as big as ever, it's going to be one of the biggest anime events of 2025 by far. Ufotable's Demon Slayer Infinity Castle will be one of the biggest anime films of 2025, but another film could be even bigger. Demon Slayer is hardly the only anime Sony Pictures is involved with, usually just as a distributor, and it's just been announced that Sony Pictures will be distributing Scarlet, the latest film from legendary anime director Mamoru Hosoda, in the United States sometime in winter 2025. Not much is known about Scarlet, but with how great a director Hosoda is, it's sure to be a great film to watch. With Mamoru Hosoda's Scarlet still a year away, not much is known about it, but there's still plenty to discuss. The sole plot description for Scarlet is that it's about a strong princess named Scarlet who crosses space-time, and based on that, Scarlet could be Mamoru Hosoda's first original film set entirely in a fantasy world. There's a chance it could be like The Boy and the Beast, and alternate between the regular world and a fantasy world, but it's a very promising premise. What's more exciting about Scarlet than its story, though, is its visual style. While a trailer hasn't been released for Scarlet, according to Mamoru Hosoda, Scarlet will neither be a traditional 2D film nor Hollywood-style CG, and will instead aim for a new look entirely. Hosoda's films are always known for their gorgeous animation, so Mamoru Hosoda's comments on Scarlet's visual style suggest that it could have some of the most inventive and all-around gorgeous animation of any anime film. And if the story is equally great, then there will be plenty to look forward to in its release. Even with so little known about Scarlet, a large part of why it's so exciting is because it's specifically a Mamoru Hosoda project. Not only do Hosoda's films have a distinct visual style complemented by fluid and all-around gorgeous animation, but Mamoru Hosoda's films, no matter the genre, always find new and exciting ways to tell dramatic stories about the importance of human relationships that are always fun to watch thanks to the characters and overall writing. There's always something fun or profound in a Hosoda project, and Scarlet is sure to be no different. Mamoru Hosoda's films are always exciting to watch, and Scarlet might be even more exciting than Demon Slayer Infinity Castle. While Infinity Castle will certainly be a fun and exciting film, anyone familiar with the series will know what to expect from it. So Scarlet might be more exciting than Demon Slayer Infinity Castle because there's going to be more variety in its story and visual style. Whatever the case, Scarlet and Demon Slayer Infinity Castle will be the most exciting anime films of 2025, and their releases will help make 2025 one of the biggest years for anime yet. In the end, these Globes surprised us, uncontroversially rewarding obvious quality in some categories, but passing over other huge achievements like Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine as Light or Timothée Chalamet's performance as Bob Dylan, and entirely ignoring Ramel Ross's masterly Nickel Boys still hurts. The mega musical Wicked, which had been winning hearts and minds and various levels of grudging and ungrudging acceptance, including from your correspondent, did not walk off with the award for Best Musical or Comedy, as we all expected, instead sent away with the Globe for Cinematic Achievement, the rather strange award instituted to acknowledge box office whoppers, including those in the now dowdy superhero genre, which otherwise get critical noses turned up at them, and for which the box office numbers themselves are surely the only meaningful arbiter. Otherwise, the Best Musical Comedy Globe, along with the Globes for Best Non-English Language, Best Supporting Female Actor, Zoe Saldana, and Best Original Song, went to Jacques Audiard's strange and soap operatic confection Emilia Perez, a Mexican crime musical about a trans-cartel mobster, which is brilliant and preposterous in proportions of about 1:2, and which has, however, been received with absolute seriousness in some quarters. An award for musical/comedy is a fitting prize in many ways. In the end, its formidable performer nominee, trans actor Carla Sofia Gascon, did not win the Globe for Best Female Actor, Comedy Musical, which went instead to Demi Moore for her storming comeback in Coralie Fargiat's body horror satire The Substance as the anguished movie star and TV workout queen in Career Crisis who takes an underground drug which will create a younger self. In the Globe's serious side, Brady Corbett's magnificent and gauntly mysterious, quasi-Randian epic, The Brutalist, dominated the night, a movie about a fictional Hungarian Holocaust survivor and architect who comes to the United States and gets taken up by a capricious plutocrat. It won Best Film Drama, Best Director for Corbet, and Best Actor for Adrian Brody, eerily echoing his glittering prizes for playing the lead in Roman Polanski's The Pianist over 20 years ago. It could well be that The Brutalist will be this year's Oppenheimer, a meaty, super serious film that awards voters can feel comfortable about endorsing, but I think a richer, more complex, and more challenging film than Oppenheimer, and one with the most extraordinary twist-reveal ending which doesn't feel like a gimmick. It's a film of Wellesian vigor and dash. The other big surprise of the evening was the Globe for Best Female Actor in a Drama, going to the Brazilian star Fernanda Torres for her resounding and heartfelt performance in Walter Salz's real-life political family drama, I'm Still Here, about the activist Eunice Paiva dealing with the disappearance of her husband Rubens during Brazil's military dictatorship of the 1970s. Torres beat out a list of big hitters to get this award, including Tilda Swinton, Kate Winslet, Nicole Kidman, Pamela Anderson, and Angelina Jolie. It was a wonderful night for Torres. Elsewhere, the male actor in a musical or comedy was another surprise. Sebastian Stan won it for A Different Man, Aaron Schimberg's doppelganger parable co-starring the unnominated Adam Pearson. Stan beat out our own Hugh Grant, whose hilarious performance in Heretic was, for me, superior. And in fact, I thought Stan gave a more interesting performance as the young Donald Trump in The Apprentice, for which he had been nominated in the drama category. Elsewhere, it was good to see Peter Strauhan win the Screenplay Globe for his sterling work on the massively entertaining drama Conclave, though sad not to see it get anything else, and I fear that Ralph Fiennes' lead turn might get crowded out in the rest of the award season. And it was richly satisfying to see Kieran Culkin win Best Supporting Actor for his jittery, hyperactive, entirely characteristic, and entirely brilliant performance as the impossible cousin in Jesse Eisenberg's terrific A Real Pain. In the end, this was Brady Corbett's night for The Brutalist, and this is the serious blockbuster which now moves into pole position for the BAFTAs and the Academy Awards. Prospective car thieves, take note. If you've broken into a luxury SUV only to find that you're trapped inside by its vengeful owner, don't answer the car phone when it rings. On the other hand, if you don't, you'll be deprived of the pleasure of hearing the dulcet tones of Anthony Hopkins in his most purring psychopathic mode. Eddie Barish, the financially desperate, hapless criminal in this high-concept thriller, is played by Bill Skarsgård, who for once is on the receiving end of evil. Serves him right for everything he did as Pennywise and Count Orlok. Locked is an American remake of 4x4, a 2019 Argentinian thriller that garnered praise on the festival circuit. It revolves around the kind of idea hatched by a clever screenwriter during a late-night drinking session. The main character, who we know is a decent sort of criminal because of how much he cares for his young daughter, Ashley Cartwright, gets the tables turned on him when he picks the wrong vehicle to rob. It's apparently been rigged into an impenetrable torture device on wheels. It's obviously not a Tesla, since all the high-tech controls work perfectly. And by impenetrable, I mean from the inside, as Eddie discovers that the doors and windows are locked, the vehicle is soundproof, and the windows are tinted so no one can see him screaming for help. Even the young woman who concernedly peers in, only to apply her lipstick. The SUV is also bulletproof, as Eddie painfully discovers when he tries shooting his way out and the bullet ricochets and hits him in the leg. When the phone rings and the words "Answer me" appear on the console, an understandably rattled Eddie refuses to answer, but the caller is persistent, so Eddie finally picks up. "Jolly good, welcome aboard," the man on the other end of the line says in a silky accent. He introduces himself as William, says he's from South Wales, and explains that he's fed up after having had his vehicle broken into 6 times with no arrests. He proceeds to torture the trapped Eddie with electric shocks delivered from the car seats, uncontrollable heat and air conditioning, and worst of all, deafening polka music, with yodeling no less. Naturally, the conversation, and good God, there's a lot of it, turns philosophical. "Have you read Crime and Punishment?" Eddie asks his tormentor, likening himself to the main character of Dostoevsky's classic. When Eddie behaves, William rewards him with treats of food released from the glove box. And when he doesn't, well, William takes control of the car and puts him through a wild ride indeed. Most annoyingly, he keeps calling Eddie old sport, as if he's read The Great Gatsby too many times. It all plays as artificially as it sounds, but as tautly directed by David Yarovesky, Brightburn, Locked manages to maintain its silly but arresting premise throughout its fortunately brief running time. It helps, of course, that the main characters are played by Skarsgård, who delivers an intensely committed performance as the criminal being tortured both physically and psychologically, and Hopkins, whose unique talent for highly articulate, beautiful-sounding villains has served him well throughout his lengthy career. We do eventually get to see William as well as hear him, but it's a good bet that the veteran actor relished the opportunity to literally phone in most of his performance. Locked could have worked as an episode of a horror anthology series, but its premise proves too thin for a feature. Working from the same playbook as claustrophobic thrillers such as Phone Booth 2002 and Don't Breathe 2016, screenwriter Michael Arlen Ross concocts a tense scenario where the desperate Eddie, Bill Skarsgård, breaks into a luxury SUV only to discover its sadistic owner William, Anthony Hopkins, has sprung an elaborate trap designed to ensnare carjackers. With the petty thief caught inside for days of torture and taunting, the movie relies on the strength of its two leads. Skarsgård and Hopkins do their best with this material, but Ross's screenplay spirals into a ham-fisted discussion centered around justice, generationalism, privilege, and the absence of courtesy in today's society. Not even actors of their caliber can make this amateurish ideological debate sound convincing as written. An English-language remake of the 2019 Argentinian thriller 4x4, Locked establishes Eddie as a troubled man. He's in debt with some shady mechanics. He's separated from the mother of his child and behind on child support. He forgets to pick up his daughter at school, and he scours the streets for an angle, testing car door handles, hoping to loot an unlocked vehicle. Though Eddie seems like a deadbeat, the script borrows logic from the screenwriting book Save the Cat when he stops to give water to a dog left in a car. He also has the approval of his daughter, who reassures him, "I still love you, even when you act like a farthead." These details signal that no matter how ill-behaved Eddie may be, he's our hero deep down. After Eddie spots a slick-looking million-dollar Dolus SUV in a parking lot just waiting to be taken, he enters and quickly discovers the doors are, you guessed it, locked. He cannot escape, break the windows, or get a signal. The interior has been reinforced with metal and soundproofed. William calls the SUV's phone, greeting Eddie with a morbidly chummy and jolly good tone, reminiscent of Hopkins' performance in Hannibal, 2001. Such a naughty boy. He tells Eddie, whom he proceeds to torture with starvation, electrified seats, and other hidden gizmos, with no hope of escape. Every eventuality has been anticipated, William brags. He explains that his SUV has been broken into 6 times before, and not once did the police investigate. A widower who's dying of cancer, William has nothing left to lose in his pursuit of so-called justice, romanticizing the days of unlocked doors and people who prided themselves on their appearance and good behavior. While the well-read Eddie surprises William with his intelligence and street smarts, the captor remains unimpressed by the thief's arguments about the socio-economic divide and how laws are made by rich people for rich people. There's lots of debate between them about how Eddie broke the social contract, along with a circular pattern where William threatens to do something terrible with the remote-controlled SUV, such as run over a street thug, prompting Eddie to repent and apologize. For Eddie, the whole experience equates to a scared straight program, albeit far more sadistic and with more urine drinking. And William's purpose never proves more complicated than wanting to give a criminal a taste of hell. Director of Brightburn, 2019, and Netflix's Nightbooks, 2021, David Yarovesky doesn't limit himself to the interior space of the SUV, which might have been a bravura conceit reminiscent of the single-location Buried, 2010. There's no consistent aesthetic here, just a lot of flashy camera work, hyperactive cutting, and larger-than-life performances. Cinematographer Michael Dalla Torre's frame goes inside and out of the vehicle, with editors Andrew Buckland and Peter Gvozdas alternating between zippy movements and the vehicle's hidden cameras. It keeps the visuals varied, but can't make the story gripping from start to finish. The last third loses all cohesion once William takes Eddie for a joyride, and because the characters and narrative remain thin, the experience runs out of steam after about an hour. Thriller is played by Bill Skarsgård, who for once is on the receiving end of evil serves him right for everything. He did as Pennywise in Locked is an American remake of 4x4, a 20 Argentinian thriller that garnered praise on the festival circuit. It revolves around the kind of idea hatched by a clever screenwriter during a late-night drinking session. The main character, who we know is a decent sort of criminal because of how much he cares for his young daughter, Ashley Cartwright, gets the tables turned on him when he picks the wrong vehicle to robots apparently been rigged into an impenetrable torture device on wheels. It's obviously not a Tesla, since all the high-tech controls work perfectly, and by impenetrable I mean from the inside, as Eddie discovers that the doors and windows are locked. The vehicle is soundproof, and the windows are tinted so no one can see him screaming for help. Even the young woman, who concernedly peers in only to apply her lipstick, the SUV is also bulletproof, as Eddie painfully discovers when he tries shooting his way out and the bullet ricochets and hits him in the leg. Jolly good welcome aboard the man on the other end of the line, as in a silky accent he introduces himself as Williams, as he's from South Wales, and explains that he's fed up after having had his vehicle broken into 6 times with no arrests. She proceeds to torture the trapped Eddie with electric shocks delivered from the car seats, uncontrollable heat and air conditioning, and worst of all, deafening palm music with yodeling, no less. Naturally, the conversation, and good God, there's a lot of it turns philosophical. Have your Ed, Crime and Punishment. Eddie asks his torment, or likening himself to the main character of Dew's classic. When Eddie behaves, William rewards him with treats off food released from the glove box, and when he doesn't well, William takes control of the car and puts him through a wild ride. Indeed, most annoyingly keeps calling the old sport as if he's read The Great Gatsby too many times. It all plays as artificially as it sounds, but astoutly directed by David Yar. Recibreet Burnlock manages to maintain its silly but arresting premise. Throughout its fortly brief running time, it helps, of course, that the main characters are played by Skarsgård, who delivers an intensely committed performance as the criminal being tortured both physically and psychologically, and Hopkins, whose unique talent for highly articulate, beautiful-sounding villains has served him well throughout his lengthy career. We do eventually get to see William as well as hear him, but it's a good bet that the veteran actor relished the opportunity to literally phone in most of his performance. Joel Schumacher found success by confining Colin Farrell to a payphone in phone booth. Willem Dafoe charmed audiences while locked in a penthouse in Inside, and now fans of such films can look forward to watching Bill Skarsgård spend almost an entire feature. Film inside an SUV and locked, a remake of the Argentine thriller 4x4 and Often 2. Cheesy for its own good. David Eaves's two-hander stars Skarsgård as a small-time carjacker who picks the wrong self-driving vehicle to break into. He finds himself trapped and tortured over the phone by William Anthony Hopkins, a dying man who is sick of petty crime. The film's attempts at exploring morality might be underwhelming, but Locked finds plenty of silly opportunities to exploit its gimmick of a premise, likely to the delight of anyone who willingly buys a ticket to a movie about Bill Skarsgård being locked in a car, not since Ganvene stole bread to feed starving children have we been expected to sympathize with a thief as much as we're at the beginning of Locked. Eddie B. Skarsgård is a hustler who can't catch a break to save his life. His beat up Then needs a new alternator and a mechanicist trying to shake him down for double what he pays in rent every month to do the job. He can't get his van back until Hapaisupenda can't do that until he puts in more hours as a delivery driver, which he can't do without the van. The vicious cycle is made worse by the fact that his adorable daughter Sarah Ashley Trite calls to see if he can pick her up from school. He has to hide his shame over his inability to come through on basic parenting tasks in an attempt to get things back on track. Eddie makes a bad decision. He breaks into a sheeny black luxury SUV hoping to find something he can sell for a few $100, but the doors quickly lock behind him, and an unknown number calls him on the car's Bluetooth system. The voice of Anthony Hopkins begins to speak to him, and Eddie learns that a broken alternator is the least of his problems. William's SUV has been broken into 6 times in the past year, and as he withered away from prostate cancer, he devised a scheme to make an example of the next thief who crossed his path. The film proceeds to play out like a watered-down version of a Saw movie, with William playing a version of Jigsaw, who's less marginally sadistic, but possibly even more self-righteous. All of those add-ons that he selected at the dealership prove useful to making Eddie uncomfortable as he uses everything from intense heat to blistering cold air conditioning to get his starving, thirsty prisoner to confront the errors of his ways. However, it's hard to imagine a dealership being involved with the tasers that he built into the car. He goes Eddie into providing his social security number, allowing him to run a credit check, and confront him over his overdue child support payments. And things really pick up once the car starts driving itself, with William threatening to steer his passenger off the edge of building or into innocent children. William makes it clear that his torture methods won't end until Eddie agrees to a violent method of penance for his sins, with options ranging from cutting off 4 fingers to shooting himself in the head with a conveniently placed pistol film that takes place entirely inside of a kerosene, inherently burdened by a limited visual vocabulary. But Yarsifin sways to get creative by relying on footage from William's 6 in-car surveillance cameras. In addition to the conventionally attic shots, those moments of naturalism work better than many of the shots taking place outside of the car, which often use glaringly heavy-handed lighting to insinuate who we're supposed to see as good and evil. That question of what we see as good and bad represents the backbone of the narrative, as the 2 characters see the world quite differently. A deeply wealthy man, William has the luxury of ruminating on principle. She sees consequences for our actions as the only thing separating humans from animals, and believes that his final purpose in life is to introduce accountability back into society. Hopkins has a blast with the roles, pouting off soliloquies about right and wrong while gleefully pushing buttons that plunge Eddie into near-death scenarios from behind a curtain. Skarsgård's Eddie, on the other hand, has an Asa Severy. Second of his day is simply spent trying to meet his family's own material needs. His performance is a bit less theatrical, but it's appropriate for a character who doesn't have the time or energy to craft a Hollywood persona for himself. These are not exactly new ideas, and Locked doesn't do much more with them than what we've seen countless times before, but perhaps anyone who expected a movie about a man trapped inside an eccentric billionaire's self-driving car, Cartwright conceptions of morality has only themselves to blame for asking too much of film like Locked Lives, and dies by its ability to entertain us with images of a man banging on tinted windows for help while he faces the prospect of being hurled off the roof of a parking garage, and on that it delivers more detail. Locked, David Yev's English-language remake of the 2019 Argentinian thriller 4x4, comes equipped with a simple premise: a petty criminal, while attempting to steal a luxury vehicle, becomes trapped inside when he triggers its aggressive and complex security system. Although that concept might seem a little thin for a feature film, there are certainly actionable possibilities for tension embedded in the idea, especially once it's revealed that the owner of the car is a sadist who can see everything that happens inside the SUV and revels in toying with the would-be thief. Alas, the disappointingly straightforward screenplay drags things out too long, relies on banal rambling dialogue, and offers little in the way of twists or turns, and Yves's direction often fails to lean into the inherent claustrophobia of the situation, while failing to generate sufficient suspense from the cat-and-mouse game engaged in by Eddie Bill Skarsgård and William Anthony Hopkins. The moral of the story: crime doesn't pay, or at least it doesn't for Eddie, who spends roughly 80 minutes of the film's 95-minute running time trapped inside William's armor-plated tank of a vehicle. Once in, there is now way out. The windows are one-way mirrors. Eddie can see out, but Noon can see, and they are also bulletproof, rendering the criminal's gun useless. Cell service has been disabled, but there's a communication system that allows William to watch and talk to Eddie. Later we learned that the elder gentleman can also remote control the car with remarkable precision. It's a fair question to ask whether Locked might have been more enjoyable if either of the characters had been even a little likable. Eddie is a total loser, a deadbeat dad whose parenting skills are on par with his ability to hold down a legitimate job. His few redeeming qualities are well concealed, and he most definitely is not the brightest bulb in the package. William, on the other hand, may have a calm, cultured voice, but his dilate tones hide a deviant mind. He's a nasty piece of work who baits the trap, then uses it to torture and torment Eddie. I'd say there's about 45 to 50 minutes of potentially engaging material in this screenplay that forces the filmmakers to add another 45 minutes of padding. Most of the extraneous material is comprised of repetitious sequences in which Eddie attempts to tear apart the inside of the car, or where William rambles on about nothing and everything. The movie is in desperate need of some piffy interplay. Eddie's contributions to their conversations don't go much beyond dropping the F-bomb on a certain level. I was reminded of Joel Schumacher's 2002 film Phone Booth, which trapped Colin Farrell in a phone booth for about 75 minutes. Some of the same elements are in play: a lunatic with a grudge who is primarily just a disembodied voice, a constricted space, and an escalation of the cat-and-mouse game's phone booth. Succeeded, however, because Schumacher understood the underlying tenets of a Hitchcockian refrigerator movie and applied them with aptitude. Yarovesky, on the other hand, founders. Even during the climax, the movie never gets exciting or edgy. We keep waiting for some kind of surprise twist that will make everything worthwhile. But there's nothing. Even when William finally appears in the flesh, it's a letdown, and the movie doesn't get us to care enough to look past the obvious, ever-widening plot holes. The performances are solid, with Bill Skarsgård getting to act without being buried under makeup, and Hopkins relying mostly on his recognizable voice. One wishes that when he finally shows up, he would lean a little more into his Hannibal Lecter personality. The antagonism between the two often feels manufactured, and it's hard to purse Eddie as a victim, even when the movie uses his young daughter in a shameless attempt at manipulation. Something I found profoundly distasteful. Making a movie with this many constraints is a daunting task that should only be attempted by someone with a crystal clear vision and a skill for wringing tension out of an inherently hard-to-swallow situation. Yarovesky, whose resume includes the misfire, Brightburn has apparently bitten off more than he can chew, the seeds of a nice little white knuckle. Thriller are evident, but they never germinate properly. The end result is profoundly disappointing and can't be saved by the few individual moments that do work. It doesn't take much effort to see the allegorical meaning of David. Yaves locked. William Anthony Hopkins is a cancer-stricken billionaire whose grief over the murder of his daughter is equaled only by his vital for the poor and a younger generation that he believes is taking more than it gives back. He has so much money that he can't keep track of it. So why not spend it on a rigged luxury vehicle with the purpose of luring would-be thieves? Enter Eddie Bill Skarsgård, a wayward ruffian, desperate to prove to his ex-wife that he can be a responsible parent to their young daughter, Ashley Cartwright, and who becomes the latest victim of William's Venus flytrap on wheels. Eddie isn't one of the people who killed William's daughter. He's just a random guy who happened to choose the wrong car to loot, which he does because he needs $400 to pay for the repair of his van. So while it's tempting to think of William as the jigsaw of the billionaire class saws, Big Bad is at least more inclined to draw distinctions. William speaks to Eddie through the screen on the car's dashboard, revealing that he's made his beautiful car into a moving cage. The seats can be used as tasers. It's soundproofed with a barrier that prevents any cell service or Wi-Fi connection, and the windows are bulletproof. The particulars are believable enough, but in toto, this contraption has been clearly sprung from, and only in the movie's imagination, when in an early logic-defying scene, Eddie tries to shoot his way out of the car, and the bullet bounces back in such a perfect fashion that he ends up piercing his own calf. You may be excused for thinking you're watching a wanted sequel. To be sure, Locked has its pleasures, especially when the filmmakers use the inherent claustrophobia of the central setting to their advantage. There's a certain excitement to the dynamic sense of standstill that Eddie is left in upon trying to rob a car, are only to find himself stuck inside a prison. And while Skarsgård doesn't have to try too hard to earn our sympathies for his character, he's committed to bringing us alongside Eddie to the brink of desperation throughout the man's attempts to escape. But even at a slim 95 minutes, Locked becomes tedious fast, and in large part because of the obviousness of its themes of all the torture that Eddie endures. Perhaps none is more grueling than William's endless droning about how awful poor people are throughout. William expounds a cartoonishly right-wing political philosophy to the absolutely uninterested Eddie, that the younger generation doesn't understand hard work, that the poor are vile creatures sucking on the tea of taxpayers, that everyone in America is given a fair shot, and so those that try to buck the system are leeches who deserve to be taught a lesson or even killed by the wealthy. And with impunity, Yarovesky and writer Michael Arlen Ross may very well believe that the ultra-rich are toying with the lower-class classes for personal gain, even scapegoating them for society's problems. But you may think otherwise, given the film's wild aesthetic detours. Locke's opening sequence, for one, sees EDM blaring over a weirdly vintage-looking montage of derelict neighborhoods and Black Lives Matter signage that practically oozes distaste for the needy and social activism. Some of the shots that dot this opening are just of people existing, though those people are also clearly experiencing homelessness. The threatening insistence of these images paint a confusing picture of the filmmaker's sympathies. William's character is indisputably villainous, but the portrayal of those he hunts, desperate people on the fringes of society who have been economically starved, casts the entire enterprise in a confusing haze of cynicism. Extra information. Locked has an absurd premise, but its intensity keeps you from dwelling on the silliness. The film is relentless, gripping you early on, with its tension, though it eventually struggles with overambition, while the thriller follows a predictable survival. Arlen isn't groundbreaking. It remains engaging. It effectively builds suspense, drawing you into the character's plight. Locked is a taut film that likely stemmed from a what-if scenario, with the writers running wild with their imagination. If you can embrace its absurd and outlandish premise, you may
find it entertaining. A remake of an Argentinian film, Locked, follows Eddie,
Bill Skarsgård, a small-time thief who breaks into a high-tech SUV parked in a lot. However, once inside, he realizes he's trapped. The doors won't open, the bulletproof windows won't break, and the car won't start as he struggles to escape the vehicle's owner. William Anthony Hopkins calls him. He reveals that Eddie is the seventh person to attempt stealing the car, and none of the previous 6 were ever arrested. What follows is a tense exchange where every curse Eddie hurls earns him a taser shock, while good behavior is rewarded with water and a cookie. When Eddie resists, William takes control of the car remotely, giving him a terrifying ride. Just as Eddie begins to understand the depth of his situation, the tension escalates. William decides to join him. Inside the car, this dialogue-heavy film keeps its conversations engaging by weaving in references like dues, crime, and punishment, but it eventually runs out of steam. This thriller thrives on the brilliance of its 2 lead actors, turning an otherwise absurd premise into an entertaining watch through a series of twists and turns. However, despite the strong performances, the excitement eventually plateaus. Bill Skarsgård delivers a sincere and committed portrayal of Eddie, making his character's ordeal feel authentic. Meanwhile, Anthony Hopkins is heard more than seen, yet his presence dominates with masterful vocal intonations. He conveys a range of moods, creating an ominous atmosphere that lingers for a major part of the film. It's evident that Hopkins relishes his role, using only his voice to instill unease and tension produced by Sam Raimi. Locked evokes comparisons to Phone Booth, the Colin Farrell thriller director David D. Yarovesky keeps the film tightly edited, ensuring a brisk pace, but the sense of claustrophobia that Eddie experiences never fully translates to the audience. The film also struggles with likability. Eddie is a small-time thief and a failure, while William is manipulative and calculating, making it difficult to root for either character. Despite a strong start, this film gradually loses its grip, ultimately leading to an underwhelming experience. Are vigilante movies considered horror? That's a tricky question, and one that most likely depends on the viewer's ethics. In 1974, Michael Winner directed Charles Bronson to the height of fame with Death Wish. Most critics despised it, but it was a resounding smash, with audiences generating $22 million at the box office. On a $3 million budget, Manhattan was a rough town back in 70/40, and crowds flocked to theaters for the visceral thrill of seeing frontier justice doled out on Hollywood's interpretation of urban baddies. Fast forward 10 years into the Reagan administration, both 1 and 2. And you have the same formula with Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Seagal, and Venom, kick-punching their way through various street thugs, drug dealers, and the occasional mercenary army. It's the same frontier justice and the same exaggerated body count. But the interesting part is that the 80s did away with any semblance of moral quandary and went straight to cartoon mayhem. Audiences didn't need to see urban decay or the tortured rationalizations of the protagonist. The what and why were removed, and theatergoers just wanted the how would it be a steam pipe through the chest, an explosive arrow blasting a henchman in two, or a knife pummeled through the top of Tommy Lee Jones' head. We essentially ditched the messy ethics of vengeance. There are scores of Greek myths that caution against this, by the way, and went straight for the jugular. Literally fast forward to 2025, and we come full circle back to questioning the morality of vengeance and its toll on those involved with David Yave's Locked A
remake of Mariano Cone's 404 from Argentina. This film essentially copies
the original blueprint, but like almost every stateside remake of a previously made international feature, waters down every single aspect that made the original stand out in the first place. See Martyrs, The Wicker Man Quarantine, Pulse, The Grudge, The Vanishing, etc., without the abrasive uncomfortable in. Your face tone and rhythm of the original were dumbfounded as to why this movie was remade in the first place. Who is this movie for? Why would a lesser version need to be made? Eddie Bache, Bill Skarsgård is a down-on-his-luck loser in desperate need of $400 to get his delivery van out of the repair shop so he can make money to support his daughter. Seeing the opportunity for a quick score, he breaks into a luxury SUV owned by William Anthony Hopkins, an affluent doctor bent on doling out violent justice, only to discover that he can't escape the car. He soon learns that this was a trap to exact revenge, and the sentence is death. Yarovesky Brightburn Nightbooks does an admirable job shooting in the close quarters of the SUV cinematographer Michael DeLeiter. Studio 666 also deserves credit for this. The camera work mimics Eddie's escalating anxiety and works exceptionally well, dialing up the tension with creative angles, edits, and movement. Skarsgård does a fine job showing Eddie's limited but evident layers. His character is a bit of a mess on screen and on the page, but he manages to break through the cliché stereotypes. For the most part, although barely more than a caricature, Skarsgård makes Eddie interesting, which should be commended because this is almost an entirely physical performance. The dialogue and exchanges we get are a huge part of the problem with this film, that aside, the film is never dull, even with all its flaws. The audience we saw this film with was engaged the entire time, laughing at Hopkins' taunts and giddy, reacting to the violence that happens as Eddie's situation increasingly becomes more dire. That's the heartbreak of a remake like this. It can dazzle with an expansion of what came before. Instead, it chooses to water down all aspects that made the film impressive. We'll give the director some cover here. We looked for evidence of reshoot or studio interference, but could find none. We looked because this film is simply toothless in almost every way. It's doubtful there would be any studio interference with Sam Rai as one of the producers, but you can never be sure. 28 people are listed as either producers or executive producers for Locked. Having numerous producers on a movie is not out of the ordinary, but 28 is a lot of opinions to give you a frame of reference. 3 of the best films of 2024, Oddity the Substance, and Exuma had 12/7 and 2 that said it's entirely possible the director had a vision closer to the original in mind and was given contradictory instructions from the sheer number of people involved in making this feature. It's certainly not unheard of. It boils down to intention or lack of. In this case, Cohn's 4x4 introduces a despicable character, a lowlife with few redeeming qualities, and tries to get the audience to side with him as an antagonist tortures him, which the audience will most likely feel justified at first. It's a morality play where the further the torture escalates, the more an audience hopefully begins to question the ends justifying the means. In Lock, the game is rigged instead of Eddie presented as the despicable life we're meant to assume he is, which is supported by scenes of him boosting a wallet and trying to get into locked cars. We immediately get scenes of Eddie sweetly joking with his daughter on the phone and giving a dog locked in a vehicle some water. Let's rip the Band-Aid off and call it what this and almost every remake of an international feature eventually turns out to be the homogenized, Americanized dumbing down of provocative content. The people who made Locked have no faith in their audience. Eddie has to be presented as essentially good, and William has to be presented as a cartoon baddie, which he eventually turns out to be. This kind of film is insulting on so many levels because the filmmaker tells you, the audience, I'll do the thinking for you. Where's the ambition, the experimentation, the guts to make a genre film that challenges the viewer to confront uncomfortable feelings about justice and retribution? They had the chance to make a movie that was more than the sum of its parts, and purposefully chose to make it less than this film directed by David Yarovesky. Written by Michael Aaron Ross, produced by Eric Keshishian. Zainab Samrisha Patrick O'Reilly, starring Bill Skarsgård, Anthony Hopkins. Cinematography, Michael Daller, edited by Andrew Buckland. Peter Gacy's music by Timothy Williams. Production company, ZQ Entertainment, RI Productions, distributed. By The Avenue. Release date, March 21st, 2025. Country, United States. Language, English. So guys, this is the review of Locked Movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.